well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome you to Carbondale Residential Efficient Building Code Updates and Opportunities. Before we begin, I just want to touch on a couple of logistical items. This webinar is being recorded and the slides and presentation will be publicly available probably within a few days. And currently, all participants are muted. But aside from our two presenters, we do have some people on the call from the town of Carbondale, from Holy Cross, from CORE, that can potentially provide insight or additional information on certain aspects of this training. So if you are one of those individuals, you can indicate that you have something to add by using the option to raise a hand. And you can find that at the bottom of the participant list in your Zoom portal. And so if you raise your hand, I will unmute you and then you'll be able to make a comment. We're going to hold questions until the end, but we do encourage all participants to put your questions in the Q&A box throughout the presentation, and then we will address them during the question and answer session at the end. But please don't use the chat box as we won't be checking it, and then your question might get lost. All right, so now I'd like to introduce the speakers. So Heidi McCullough is a certified home energy rater with Sopris Home Energy, and she will review the specific changes in the residential energy code and strategies for meeting them, including solutions related to envelope, HVAC, electric load, solar, and more. Maisa Metcalf, a residential energy consultant with CLEAR, will provide an overview of utility incentives, tax credits, rebates, and financing options for renewable energy and energy efficiency measures available to new construction projects in the town of Carbondale. Okay, but before we get going, I want to provide some context for Carbondale's residential efficient building program. In 2006, Carbondale was a regional leader in adopting a climate and energy action plan. And this led to the formation of the Residential Efficient Building Program in 2007. And then the Climate and Energy Action Plan was updated in 2017, setting new targets that include reducing emissions from building energy use 50% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. It also has a focus on increasing local renewable energy generation. And this led to adopting updates to the Residential Efficient Building Program in 2019, which is what we're here to talk about today. However, because we're living in a rapidly changing world, also in 2019, a net zero task force formed and made some recommendations to town staff and trustees for future code updates to be implemented with incremental steps for new residential and commercial buildings in Carbondale to be net zero by 2030. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heidi McCullough to tell us about the changes.
Thanks, Catherine. As Catherine said, I am a certified home energy rater and a residential energy consultant with Sopris Home Energy. So I'm really glad I got this opportunity to work with CLEAR and talk with you guys today. I wanted to start with a really brief overview of the previous residential efficient building program requirements for the town of Carbondale. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the REBP checklist with its target scores based on home size. The points were earned through site management and material selection, as well as energy efficiency measures in the home above code, and each tier in the code had its own target score on the checklist. In addition to the checklist, there were compliance paths to choose from. Compliance options included using ResCheck to show the home's performance above code, using an energy rater to get a home energy rating score to show that the home met a target HERS index score, or using a prescriptive path of efficiency measures in the build. At that point, renewables or solar were only mandatory for homes over 5,000 square feet. Next slide, please. For the new code cycle, some revisions were made to the existing framework to move the code toward the town's energy efficiency goals and to bring the code into alignment with the reality of building today and broader code language and HERS procedures and protocols. Some of the 2020 revisions included removing some checklist items that are now required by code. These are things like carbon monoxide detectors and a host of small other items that are now required, so you don't earn points for those items. The checklist was also reviewed to ensure that points are awarded in a way that is in line with costs required to implement those measures. Some points were adjusted according to that analysis. The requirement for a solar thermal rough-in was removed. This was a costly requirement that was rarely used, as most projects were opting for solar electric, which is a little bit more economical. Home energy ratings are also now required for all homes over 2,000 square feet. And the protocol for calculating square footage has been adjusted to be more compatible with code language and with HERS, the home energy rating standards. More details on some of the nuances that don't apply to every single project can be found in the complete language of the code ordinance. It's located you can find it in a PDF version on the Town of Carbondale website. We've got a link to that in a later slide, and we'll mention it again, but to help people find the details of, smaller details of some of the rare instances that'll come up. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have a basic rundown of all of the changes. As you can see that the home size threshold has changed for all of the tiers. Now tier 1 begins at homes 2,000 square feet, begins with homes below 2,000 square feet as opposed to 3,000 before. The REPP checklist requirements for all of the tiers have remained the same. There was a requirement to show percent over code. Now this is only required in homes that are pursuing the tier 1 PV path. Tier 1 homes have the option of choosing either showing compliance through a home energy rating or through using solar electric. If you are using that solar electric, you still need to use ResCheck to show your compliance and your percent above code. Tier 2 through 4 homes, the thresholds for the PV, for the HERS index score have changed, as they all have, but they also require solar. So both are HERS rating and solar above tier 1. The PV array size for tier 4 homes could possibly exceed the roof side in some designs. The code does allow for things like offsite renewables and fee in lieu. This is one of the things that I mentioned, that you can find language in the PDF of the code ordinance. But in general, tier 4 homes do require 2 watts per square foot of conditioned floor area as opposed to 1.5 watts with the other tiers. Requirements for efficiency of heating and cooling has all remained in place. There's now been the addition of an efficiency requirement for the HSPF rating for any heat pump heating or cooling. This is just a reflection of the town's desire to move towards smart electrification and supporting the fact that now there is enough equipment available to people to use air source heat pumps as a primary heating system in our climate. Next slide, please. For multifamily homes in general follow the same tier requirements that we mentioned in the previous slide, the same size allowances and requirements. These requirements kick in when the building has 3 or more units that are not in a townhouse configuration. So basically talking about apartments and condo type buildings here. As I mentioned, the tier requirements are the same, but the amount of solar is different. Solar is required for all units over 2,000 square feet at 1 watt PV per square foot, and that's per the REBP checklist. Calculating square footage in the REBP checklist for multifamily units has changed a little bit. We're now including the interior common space and taking an average and applying that to all of the units in the home. This is slightly different than the way that your HERS rater is going to calculate square footage for multifamily units. So these two things will not be in line, but it is that REBP checklist square footage that you will use to determine how much renewables are required for that particular unit. Next slide, please. So again, another very quick summary of the significant changes. The requirement for solar is no longer limited to the very large homes. The home energy rating is required for all tiers with the exception of tier 1 when you choose the PV path, and the HERS index thresholds for all of those tiers have been lowered. The requirement to use ResCheck to show the percentage above code has been removed, except for the PV path for tier 1. And we've added an HSPF minimum for heat pumps, encouraging smart electrification. And here's this link that I mentioned earlier. That is a live link to the actual PDF of the code language on the Town of Carbondale website. It's full of all of the details that we aren't going over here, a slightly more low-level look at everything. Next slide, please. All right, so in preparation for this presentation, I went through and I created a full HERS rating and a full model of a home that meets, at least one home that meets each tier described in the Town of Carbondale Energy Code. These models were all created with Zone 6 IECC 2015 prescriptive requirements as their baseline. In addition to that, each one of these homes was modeled including the Carbondale prescriptive requirements. That's the heating and cooling efficiencies, solar if it's required for the house that we're talking about. What isn't figured into the analysis of each one of these are the REBP checklist items. This is a pretty broad, the REBP checklist covers such a broad array of measures that it would have been hard to try to create very many models following this, but we do talk a little bit about it. Next slide, please. So for the tier 1, this is what I'm showing here. All of the measures and the bullet points are the measures that I upgraded above code in this energy model. You'll see that on each one of these, each example moving forward here. In the tier 1 path home, HERS path home, I took that 2015 IECC home and made some electrical and mechanical upgrades. I did not make any shell upgrades in this model because I did not need to. I was really trying to create examples, not really suggestions for everyone. And when we look at these, we want to keep in mind that the size of the house, the shape of the house, there are a lot of variables in a HERS rating since it does look at the house as a system. But for this particular house, I chose Energy Star appliances, 100% LED lighting inside, out, and in the garage. All of those things go into consideration in the HERS rating. And the significant upgrade in this one was a tankless water heater. I modeled a very readily available Rinnai water heater in this home, and it gained us 10 points in this model. This, I believe, is about a 1,500 square foot home. So that it won't always be set 10 points, but you can look at this measure and know that adding a tankless water heater from a sort of low quality gas water heater as a baseline is going to give you a big margin in your HERS score. So we got a 10-point improvement there. There's also a 94 AFUE furnace in this home. And since this home was fully ducted, I chose the ventilation from a fairly efficient HRV. It's got an ASRE, which is the rating that your energy rater will use, of 75%. So that's also an upgrade from the supply-only ventilation that I modeled in all of these base models. And just for a frame of reference, this particular model happened to have an insulated basement. And so I ran one scenario where I heat pump water heater in that basement, and that brought the HERS score down to 45. I mention that because these are all trade-offs. In the HERS energy and the energy rating system, you can choose which measures you want to pursue to improve the score. But in this base model, I used the tankless gas water heater, but also ran it with a heat pump water heater and got that score 45. Next slide, please. So for the tier 2, I modeled an all-electric home, and just for everyone's frame of reference, I took this same base model and I ran a furnace and a gas water heater, and I also ran this as an all-electric model, and the HERS score was the same. Now this model includes the 1.5 watt of solar required for tier 2 homes. It was also all LED lighting, Energy Star appliances, In this one, I modeled an electric resistance water heater as opposed to a heat pump water heater as a bit of a budget trade-off. Also considering that in some homes that don't have basements, it's a bit more of a quandary of where to place a heat pump water heater. So I chose this one as sort of a compromise. I did do a fully ducted cold climate heat pump in this home. These systems are also available, and they're, they do perform well in our climate. They can be a primary heating system. These are not the old-fashioned ducted heat pumps that we were kind of accustomed to, and we've kind of had a hard time getting our head past. I did use a non-ducted but very efficient balanced ventilation system in this. This is an HRV that's not tied to the duct system. I chose it again because it's more affordable than a fully ducted HRV, and it's very efficient, and that gave my energy rating a bit of a boost. The only shell measure, the only thing I changed about the structure of the home in this one is that I did very slightly improve the air infiltration in this house. This one has 2.5 ACH50. The code requirement in 2015 IECC at Zone 6 is 3 ACH50. So at 2.5, we're in a realm that any conventional builder can reach with the skills and materials that they already have on site. It's an improvement in air leakage, but it's not a very high goal, not a very high target. And Catherine, if you could help me out, if you could back up to the Tier 1 screen slide for just 1 second. What I failed to mention here is that I also ran this same baseline model. I just wanted to back up, and I caught myself that I missed this. I ran a Tier 1 PV path home as well. I left it at the 2015 IECC. I made no upgrades whatsoever, and I just added the required amount of solar onto that home. And that house did work out to be, I think the HERS score was 42, but it felt still just as a frame of reference, just adding the PV brought that home into compliance on the HERS path as well. So thanks for indulging me there, Catherine. If we could move ahead to the Tier 3 home now. So the Tier 3 home, this is a mixed fuels home. I included that 1.5 watt of solar per square foot per code. This one does have a tankless water heater. In this case, it's a slightly larger home, maybe a slightly more complex shape, which changes variables within the home. And I got a 6-point improvement in my score with that tankless water heater. Again, Energy Star appliances. This one has an electric dryer, and I'm mentioning that because you do get a bonus. It changes the score a bit. In this particular model, it was 1 point by changing from a gas to an electric dryer. I also upped the air sealing a little bit in this model. This one has 2 ACH50. Again, that's a totally doable target for a conventional builder. They don't have to have a ton of experience on high performance homes. We're not using any fancy membranes or anything at 2 ACH50. And I've gone back to this balanced ventilation system here. This is an HRV fully ducted with that 75 efficiency rating on the heat exchanger in the HRV that I modeled here. That combination with, as I mentioned, very little change to the shell gives us a HERS score of 32, which brings us into compliance. Next slide, please. So Tier 4 is a slightly different beast. We're talking about a pretty large home here. And at this point, the solar requirement kicks into being 2 watts per square foot. Just making that single change alone brought the home into the requirement for the tier chart that we looked at earlier. For a Tier 4 home, your challenge is going to be meeting the RABP checklist score requirements, and to be honest, that will be a bigger consideration in a Tier 3 home as well. But once you get into this realm of looking for 430 points on the RABP checklist, this is a project where everyone's going to have to be very mindful of site management, materials selection, and a lot of other considerations and upgrades in the home that weren't required to meet the HERS and PV standards. I haven't done a full analysis, but my experience tells me that a Tier 4 home that meets the Carbondale code is going to be very close, if not actually meeting some of the green building certification requirements. So there I'm talking about LEED for home or the National Green Building Standard. those checklists are very similar to the RABP checklist. I mentioned this in case anybody's looking for an extra way to market their homes as green in addition to just being energy efficient, but that's something to look into on these higher tier homes. Next slide, please. And last, I just wanted to give a really brief description of the home energy rating system. I think a lot of people in the room here are familiar with the system, but just a few clarifications that we talk about HERS ratings, home energy ratings. We use the phrases interchangeably, but the home energy rating system is a system that is very strictly controlled and overseen by ResNet, and all home energy raters or HERS raters are required to follow a very strict set of rating protocols to ensure consistency nationwide. If they want to make any sort of variance from those standards, they have to ask their quality assurance provider or make a statement as to why they're doing it. And again, all testing and inspection must be done by a ResNet certified individual. No part of the testing or inspections can be farmed out to an uncertified individual. ResNet does offer a certification that's slightly lower than a full HERS rater, and a rater can get a staff member certified as a field inspector, but that certification has to come from ResNet in order to do blower door or duct testing on these homes. And also, the HERS raters are using one of only a few different rating software packages, and these software packages are pretty standardized, so the results are very similar between the two, and they all produce a variety of different reports. These reports can show energy code, rebate program, and tax credit compliance. They can also show the actual energy loads of the home in lots of different ways, and the rating software codes the reports that the town of Carbondale wants to see for your permit submission. And this is just a small note here for any raters in the room, or note for communicating with your raters. The town of Carbondale is recognizing the IECC Climate Zone 6, which is not the default for your raters. So they do need to make that small change. I'm just mentioning it since we're talking about home energy ratings. All right, next slide, please. And that's it for me. I wanted to hand things off to Maisa. Please feel free to put any questions in the Q&A and we can all return to them. But now Maisa is going to talk to us about rebates and incentives.
Right. Hi, everybody. My name is Maisa. Thank you so much for having me today. We want to start talking about beneficial electrification. If the town of Carbondale really wants to achieve its climate energy goal, which is 100% by 2050, we need to start focusing on all electric new construction. There are several benefits to all electric homes. Just to name a few: safety in the home. There will be no risk of fires by removing gas or propane appliances. Improves efficiency of total energy use. Heat pumps are more energy efficient than gas furnaces, for example. Healthier indoor air quality. By not having gas appliances in the home, you're not going to have all those air pollutants such as carbon monoxide. And better for our planet. Reduce greenhouse gas emission, improves public health, and assists our community in reaching climate goals, such as the Carbondale goal. All right, next slide. Oh, I think you're going to have to do one more time. It looks like the picture didn't go. Can you guys see the pictures? Oh, that's strange. Can you go back one? Well, we had a picture of a map, but anyway, according to, I don't have the quote, so do you know what's going on, Catherine? That's weird.
Yeah, I don't know why the graphic isn't showing.
Yeah,
so
reason it's not showing, but we can share the slides with everyone. Anyway, just had a quote saying that in 15 years, homes that are all electric will be they will use 35% less carbon. Yeah, we tried that, Mary. It's not working for some reason, but we'll share the slides with everyone. Here in this slide, we had a picture of the map of the town of Carbondale and showing exactly where. So if you guys know Carbondale well, we have the Rio Grande Trail. North of the trail is served by Holy Cross, and south of the trail is served by Xcel Energy. The good thing about town of Carbondale is no matter where you're building, there will be incentives for new construction and retrofits as well. Just want to remind everyone, if you're not familiar with CLEAR, through several contracts we have in place, we can offer free energy coaching services. So if you have any projects in Garfield County, you can get in touch with us and we can provide some ideas for materials, mechanical systems, and also a package with all the different incentives we're going to be talking today and more. So my contact info will be at the very end of the presentation, and you can get in touch with us and we can certainly help. Next slide. Oh, this is really frustrating. Yeah, I don't know. So Xcel Energy offers incentives for single family. That we had a few pictures here of tables with the different incentives. So we'll share with everyone those incentives. But Xcel's grid in Colorado will be at least 60% renewable by 2030 and 100% by 2050. And the single family program is great because it offers prescriptive rebates for things like, you know, Energy Star washer, Energy Star dryer. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we'll share with everyone. For heat pumps, heat pump water heaters. So you can get all those prescriptive rebates as well as going above code. And the way they determine that is that you have to work with the HERS rater, and they go in the Xcel web portal and they submit an analysis, a report that shows what percentage you're going above 2012 IECC. And the higher you go, the more the performance, the higher the performance of the home, the bigger the incentives. So I'll make sure I mention everything. And then the incentives through Xcel are paid directly to the builder. And if you have any questions about the program, get in touch with us and we can send you some more information. Next slide. So again, we had a table on this slide showing what the Xcel Energy multifamily program includes, but it's often used for construction or renovation projects of 50,000 square feet or less. And this service identifies energy saving opportunities and offers rebates for installing high efficiency equipment. The nice thing about working with Xcel in this program is that if from the very beginning, they will help you figure out the best options for your project, and they would then provide a rebate for installing those measures. Next slide. Okay, so Holy Cross also has some aggressive goals. The goal is to increase the renewable electricity provided to members from 39%, which is the current, to 70% by 2030, and reduce gas house emissions by 70%. What Holy Cross does is, if you already know you're building all electric homes, oh, we're actually, Mary Wynn is saying here to us that it's actually about 44% renewable currently. That's great. So there are some prescriptive rebates. So again, if you already know you're doing all electric, there are some amazing rebates for going all electric. For example, cold climate heat pumps, you can get $850 per ton as long as you meet all those criteria. Heat pump water heater, the rebate is also amazing, $1,450 and $80 for induction oven. One thing I want to mention is that Holy Cross wants folks to either get the beneficial electrification rebate or the solar. You cannot get both for new construction projects. Next slide. Yeah, I also had a table on this slide showing how Holy Cross does their custom rebate for, so basically what they do is, if you're not sure if you're going all electric or gas, there is an option for a custom rebate. So you would have to hire an engineering firm to do the study that will be based on lowering total energy used by converting to electricity. So they compare how much the home will be using if it was gas, how much it would be if it was electricity, and then the savings, then they do some calculations, and that's how they do their custom rebate. And this is also a good option for multifamily properties in town of Carbondale. The calculated total energy may not include solar PV net metered offsets. So again, no solar rebates for new construction if you're already meeting the mandate. Okay, next slide. CORE, Community Office for Resource Efficiency. So again, a nonprofit working in the Warren Fork Valley. So they serve Glenwood to Aspen. And they recommend for new construction their Net Zero Homes grant. I don't have the HERS index and the core rebate available on this slide, but again, we'll share with everyone. their grant can be combined with the core solar rebate, but there are no solar rebates for complying with the code solar mandate. So you may only apply for solar rebate if you're installing more solar PV than you require to. And the HERS index number is defined as the final index score after the completion of the construction and tested by a certified ResNet HERS rater. So according to Heidi's presentation and the new code, we don't have the numbers in front of us, but every home being built in town of Carbondale today could get the core grant, even if it's the minimum amount, which is $2,000. Core does prefer that you guys contact them directly, so I did include Marty Treadway's contact info here on the slide, and I think Marty is also participating today. So if you want to raise your hand, Marty, if I forgot to mention anything, let us know. Next slide. So there's also an efficient home tax credit. It's the 45L is a tax filing, but it's also known as EPACT. It is expected to get hard to reach, so your home energy rater can actually run a report to show if the building complies. But we do have some numbers here. It's $2,000 for residential units 3 stories or less, 50% improvement over the 2006 IECC, and 10% of that must come from envelope improvements. We know for a fact that this is going to change in 2021. So we try to keep everybody posted and in the loop. There's also the solar investment tax credit. As we know, it's going to keep going down. For projects completed this year, 2020, it will be 26%, and then next year, 22%. After 2022, it goes away. And I just wanted to let everybody know that all these rebates are subject to change and subject to pre-approval. So it's always better to contact us or the utilities or Core in the very beginning of the project and the design stages. So yeah, thank you so much. And next slide, I think is the final one. Well, the next slide should be my contact info, but I don't know what happened with our slides. I will make sure we share with everyone. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I think it might be some kind of Zoom sharing issue that none of those tables were there. But what we can do is we'll make a PDF of these slides and send them out, and so that you will have the additional information to go with the information that Maisa just gave you. So thank you, Maisa. That was great. So we do have a few questions and comments in the Q&A box, and we also have some other participants with us that I'm going to unmute. So Jeff Dickinson's with us. He was the consultant to the town of Carbondale that did a lot of the work to help make these changes to the code. And then also John Plano, who's town building inspector, is also with us. I think I just also added. So you both now, I think Jeff is showing up as Lorraine, but you could both unmute yourselves to be able to speak. But we do have a question from Mark McLean, and I think it might be referring to the table that we looked at earlier. So let's just pull that up. But Mark McLean says, percent over code. Does that refer to total UA or performance? So
John can correct me. My understanding, John or Jeff, either one can, but my understanding is that what we're looking for is there's the 2015 IECCUA report. If we are asking for the performance report, simple enough for us to change, but as far as percent over code, if you are, again, we're only required to show percent over code when you are not doing a HERS rating now in that one path of tier 1. I'll go ahead and skip ahead to your other question about referring to the UA alternative as ResCheck. I'm referring to ResCheck software because you don't have to be a home energy rater, or you don't have to hire a home energy rater to complete ResCheck. That being an alternative to hiring a rater. So when I mention ResCheck, I'm specifically referring to the DOE software. if that makes sense. So that, and as I said, John or Jeff can correct me, but I think we're looking for the report that the home energy rater would show you out of your RIM rates, or out of your rating software, would be the UA report, or we could show both.
This is Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is the report from Res Check, which when you run the Res Check, it'll give you that percent over code.
UA percent, not performance, correct?
That's correct, yes. It's out down at the bottom of the output sheet.
Mhm.
It says your UA and required UA, and then it says percent better than code.
Yeah. And Mark has also presented another question here that I don't fully understand. Maybe he could type the clarification. And I don't mean to jump ahead, but Mark's also got a question about the town of Carbondale website and less than 3,000 square feet. Mark, if you're still online, if you could clarify your question, that will help us answer it.
You know what, we could just also allow Mark to talk. So this might be easier, Mark, if you can unmute yourself, maybe you could clarify your question.
Yeah, sure. There's a PDF on the Carbondale website that I downloaded, and then I also downloaded the code verbiage from the service where they keep their code, and they don't match. One of them says 2,000 square feet, and the other one says 3,000 square feet. I'm pretty sure you mean 2,000, but I just wanted to let you know those don't match.
For what? For which piece? I'm still not understanding which piece you're referring to.
The tier 1 requirements.
Are you seeing the old? Are you by any chance seeing the old chart?
I think it is the old chart, but it's labeled as the new chart, as far as I can tell.
Oh, if you could share that link with us, that would help us figure out we might need to clean up something on the website.
Okay.
Mark, I'll look. Hey, Mark, this is John. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, John.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll look into that. I didn't think we had I thought we removed all the old ones. And I wanted to make a comment about the percent over code, because we're not enforcing that anymore. That red portion is being removed.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not looking for 20% over code or 30% over code or 40% over code with the tiers, because we're not doing res check on those tiers anymore.
Joan, was I correct though that if you're doing the PV path in tier 1, you still want to see a percent over code there, and it's just to show compliance with code?
That's just to show compliance with code. It's not a percent.
Yeah, gotcha.
No, tier 1 is just going to be code compliant envelope. And then the other 20, 30, and 40% are being removed.
Right, so everything on that chart that's in red is referring
anything in red is what is
to the old code.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everything in red's being removed.
Right.
Okay. So can I ask another question?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
So I'm also looking at the spreadsheet, and on the tier 1 requirement, it says something on there, something like prescriptive plus solar with res check, which I just find a very confusing statement, because the prescriptive path and the total UA compliance path are two different things.
Yeah.
I'm not completely sure if it's okay just to have a total UA calculation, or do I actually have to, or can I just go prescriptive and turn in nothing?
I believe I can answer that question. These are they're the town of Carbondale prescriptive requirements shown in the chart. Things like the AFUE, the heating and cooling standards, those things are required. And then you also use ResCheck to show that the UA compliance meets 2015 IECC, since the town of Carbondale requirements don't address our values. Am I correct? I mean, anyone can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
You're correct. We're just using the res check for verification that it meets code.
Yep. And there are prescriptive requirements from the town of Carbondale in addition to that compliance path.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that table 5 in the ordinance when you look at that, which is basically what you're showing there.
Okay, thank you for your questions, Mark. If you have any more, you can go ahead and type them in the Q&A. And then we have another question from Todd. He asks, has Carbondale considered giving builders that have gotten certifications like Passive House or Zero Energy a whole pass on these requirements? This is what Golden is going to. So for commercial, Golden give LEED Gold, Platinum, or Passive House certification a pass on the jurisdictional sustainability requirements. So I think this is a question probably for John. Is that something that Carbondale will consider?
Well, I do have, authority to allow alternative compliance paths. And if somebody wanted to propose something as an alternative, I think it's 104 in the beginning of every chapter is the alternatives. And I'm always open to, if there is another methodology that somebody can show me that is getting us to the same end goal, then yeah, I'm open to that.
And I would like to add a kind of a bit of a clarification to Todd's language or the wording here. If the building itself earned one of those certifications, my understanding is that John's saying that's an alternate compliance path, not necessarily a builder that has built a LEED or a Passive House home in the past. Just a clarification about the builder and the structure that we're applying for permitting and coding.
Oh, absolutely. It has nothing to do with the builder.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And then a question from Paul. He wants to clarify, can builders do their own compliance check using ResCheck and then not necessarily have to hire a rater? So I think this is another question for John.
Yeah, that would only be in tier 1.
Right, because now all the other tiers are tied to HERS score, which
Yeah.
Only in the PV path of tier 1, not in the HERS path.
right.
Yeah.
So it does require hiring a rater.
So not if you select the PV option.
True. So you can do a res check and PV or do a HERS rating. One path or the other.
In tier 1.
In tier 1. True.
And then we have a question from Chris. Who funds the Net Zero Home Grant Program? Chris, that is CORE, the Community Office for Resource Efficiency. And so if you want more information on that, we encourage you to contact them directly. And we provided Marty Treadway's contact information on that slide, which we'll be sending out after the fact. So hopefully that answers your question.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
How many people are on this webinar?
43.
Maisa.
43.
Oh, that's good.
And it looks like we have a question from Chris. Why is the climate zone revised to 6B, colder, when the climate is getting warmer?
That's a good question. So quite a few years ago, climate zones were based on zip codes. Well, then they changed it and went to counties. So when we look at counties, Garfield County is climate zone 5, Eagle County is climate zone 6, and Picton is climate zone 7. So in reality, when you look at climate zone 5, and you look at, which includes Grand Junction and includes Las Vegas, is in climate zone 5. During the adoption process, if we kept it at climate zone 5, we would have been dropping our R values during that adoption. And that's essentially not what the intent is to go lower. So yes, it was revised to 6 because it seemed to make the most sense. Because in Elgibel, you could jump from corner to corner and you'd have 3 different climate zones within 10 feet of each other. So climate zone 6 made the most sense for Carbondale.
And it's really important for folks, and I know I'm harping on this point, your energy rater needs to understand that they have to make this change in their software, or it will skew your compliance, and you may or may not, your house might not comply, because it does change the HERS score in the home. It's on a lot of models, maybe not every model.
Okay, and then we have a similar question to the one that Todd asked about whether, you know, you could use passive house or a zero energy home to meet the requirements. Paul wants to know, does building to Energy Star cover any of this?
Building to Energy Star requires a home energy rating, and at that point you would have your score. There aren't HERS index score thresholds for Energy Star. It's a slightly different performance evaluation, but it does require a home energy rater. So, I mean, John can say if he would simply just accept a house that earned Energy Star and replace for these prescriptive requirements on from the town of Carbondale, but you would be meeting the code requirements, the baseline 2015 IECC code. You probably would run into that zone problem because that's an EPA program. John, would you accept that Energy Star in place of any of the town's prescriptive requirements?
Well, at this moment in time, I'm not, because I'm not completely familiar with Energy Star criteria and what that would entail.
It's
so
a more onerous process to get Energy Star than to follow this path, if that matters at all.
It is more onerous?
Yes, by far.
See, I'm not familiar with the Energy Star path yet, so that would be something to have to look into.
Yeah.
I don't know if it would be equivalent.
I think any compliant home, I'm an Energy Star rater, I think any compliant home that met Energy Star, I believe, would meet all of our prescriptive requirements. But you don't want to make a hard line statement there. I just think that there are all these checklists and you're restricted as to which HVAC installers you can use with Energy Star. I think the builder has more freedom following this path than pursuing Energy Star, but I wouldn't want to talk anyone out of pursuing Energy Star if they wanted to.
I can clarify a little bit. What the Energy Star doesn't have is a lot of the green requirements, I think. So you would still need to do the checklist and meet the green requirements.
Absolutely, the checklist for sure.
Okay, so I don't see any further questions at this point.
There's
Yes.
one more from Chris. Is the REBP, aside from making our systems more efficient, moving toward being better at staying cool? Reflectivity, shading, window film, I cannot read that word, window films, etc. That one is under chat if anybody wants to read from Chris.
Yeah, the answer is yes. There's things about shading and orientation and basically good passive solar design, so you can get points for things that help with the heating as well as the cooling.
Great, thanks, Jeff.
So Jeff and John, do you have any further comments or things that you would like to draw attention to for the participants today that you don't want them to miss about the changes to this code?
No, I think it's been a pretty good overview that Heidi put together. So thank you all at Clear. And, we've been working on this code, through CORE, my company Biospace is through CORE, and trying to bring it as much up to date as possible. So I think it's just understanding the checklists. They're pretty similar to what has been done throughout the Roaring Fork Valley for the last 20 years or so, but really just tweaking it. And a lot of those items on that new tier requirements slide there, that really highlights what the changes are. So I think it's, it's been a pretty good overview.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And I'm going to join you in thanking Heidi and Maisa for putting this information together. And I'm going to thank everybody for joining us. I hope you found it of value. And with that,
Thanks for taking your time, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
we're going to say goodbye. Thanks very much.
I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.